Our hopes are rising again for relief for the people in the Gaza Strip as the United Nations declares that aid delivery could begin, quote, in the next day or so. UN Chief Antonio Guterres is in Egypt to push for that aid to start flowing as the humanitarian situation looks to worsen with the conflict between Israel and Hamas threatening to persist into a third week. The UN says it is in deep and advanced negotiations with all relevant sides to ensure that an aid operation does start as soon as possible. Mr. Guterres says he's dealing with, quote, restrictions being imposed on aid deliveries. The UN has described the lack of basic necessities in Gaza as, quote, beyond catastrophic, and says any delivery needs to be carried out at scale, and in a sustained way. The UN refugee chief also raised concerns that any escalation of the military activity there would be, quote, catastrophic for the enclave. International aid has been piling up on the Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing, with many on the other side in dire need of food and water. Gaza remains under siege, with Israel blocking the movement of water, food and fuel. Violence in the West Bank has surged, fueling concerns that the occupied Palestinian territory could become a third front in the conflict. Our Palestinian health authorities say 13 people died after Israeli troops raided and called in airstrikes on a refugee camp.
ما تم في مخيم نور شمس، احنا لم نفاجأ في اسلوب الاحتلال اللي تعودنا عليه، هاجم المخيم، ارتكب مجزرة في وضح النهار بدون سابق انذار، هاجم البيوت، هاجم المرافق، جرف كل شيء تقريبا، دمر البنية التحتية، البنية الصرف الصحي، المياه، قطع الكهرباء مباشرة عن كل سكان المخيم.
And Tel Aviv has leveled a northern Gaza district after giving families there just a half-hour warning to escape. A church in Gaza City, which had been sheltering hundreds of displaced Palestinians, was hit overnight by an Israeli airstrike, according to the Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem and Palestinian health officials. Israel says it is evacuating residents from a town near its border with Lebanon. Cross-border fire between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah movement in southern Lebanon has intensified. Yesterday, Hezbollah said it fired rockets at an Israeli position and troops responded with shelling. The heavy exchange of fire was the latest in the worst bout of violence on the border in 17 years. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to contain the spillover and escalation of the conflict are underway. Some world leaders have agreed on the need to prevent escalation of violence across the Middle East and are working with regional parties. On the conflict, Ross Cullen joins us live from Tel Aviv. Ross, agencies, governments all claiming aid will get delivered and, quote, in the next day or so. But there seems to be a lack of progress on the ground.
Yeah, there's some real issues in the infrastructure side of this. The roads in and around the Rafah border crossing on the Israeli, after the Israeli airstrikes in that area on the Gaza side have been cratered, potholed and damaged, and they have had to be repaired by Egyptian machinery being brought over from Egypt ahead of those trucks. As the works begin as a result of that, the Israeli airstrikes on the 10th and the 16th of October to try to repair the damage. We have had also the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been in Egypt on their side of the border, their side of the Rafah frontier crossing, speaking, and he has said that it is absolutely essential to solve this problem quickly. This is not a humanitarian situation as normal. This is a war zone, but he did say that a humanitarian ceasefire would make things safer. We can listen in now to a little bit more of what Antonio Guterres had to say.
These trucks are not just trucks. They are a lifeline. They are the difference between life and death for so many people in Gaza. And to see them stuck here makes me be very clear. What we need is to make them move. To make them move to the other side of this wall. To make them move as quickly as possible and as many as possible.
Now, the 20 trucks that are lined up on the Egyptian side of the border, which have been given permission to head into Gaza, Israel saying it would not thwart the delivery of basic aid like food, water and medicine. Those 20 trucks are believed to be able to supply just a fraction of what the people across the Gaza Strip need. Antonio Guterres saying there has to be a, quote, meaningful number of deliveries every day into the Palestinian territory to try to make some progress on supporting the people there. And there's also estimated to be another 3,000 tons of aid waiting at the nearest airport, which is Egypt's northeast Sinai airport of El Arish.
Ross, as far as the fight on the ground goes, reports of violence intensifying in the West Bank and also more crossfire between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah movement. With all this intensifying and spreading, diplomatically, what moves are being made to stop this spreading any further?
Well, we know that there are 4,000 people who have now lost their lives in the Gaza Strip as a result of the Israeli bombing, which began as a result of the Hamas atrocities here inside Israel on October the 7th. So 2 weeks ago. There are also, though, a growing number of people who've lost their lives in the West Bank. At least 76 at the latest count who've been killed by Israeli security forces, or indeed at some point by some of them by Israeli settlers in those settlements in the occupied West Bank. So we do know there's a rising number of deaths also in the West Bank, not just in Gaza. And then the third front, where Israeli defense forces are also focused, up north on the border, the UN-agreed ceasefire line with Lebanon. And we know that there have also been incursions down to the south of the country by the Lebanese army to try to also intercept Hezbollah positions, which are set up down there. Often their missile launchers fired towards Israel. They've also fired anti-tank missiles. And overnight, Israel, the Air Forces used a drone to, in their words, quotes, eliminate terrorists operating on the Lebanese side of the border. So there is a real fear that not just this could be a wider conflict outside Israel and the Palestinian territories, but just in those areas alone, Israel battling with Hezbollah militants in the north, and then the situations which have deteriorating in the West Bank, but have almost deteriorated beyond despair in the Gaza Strip situation. That is what the Antonio Guterres, the United Nations, the UN Relief and Works Agency, the World Food Programme and the World Health Organization are all trying to come together to deal with the first priority to get aid into the Gaza Strip.
And thanks for that update. Ross Cullen speaking to us live there from Tel Aviv.